Thanks for joining us. First today on True Crime News. She became one of the most famous prosecutors in American history during O.J. Simpson's trial of the century. But after Simpson was acquitted, Marcia Clark resigned from the LADA's office and became a New York Times best-selling author. Now, Marcia is tackling another headline-grabbing true crime case that asks, was a woman wrongfully sent to death row? Marcia Clark, 3 decades after O.J.'s trial and just months after Simpson's death.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder.
3 decades later, opening up with true crime news about the high-profile case, saying lingering anger in the black community came into play in O.J. Simpson's acquittal.
In the Simpson case, there is no question that the atmosphere in Los Angeles in particular was fraught. I mean, literally the city was burning a year and a half prior to that because of the acquittal of the police officers who beat Rodney King.
It was a turbulent time.
White people, excuse me, but that's the way I feel about this here situation, trying to set the brother up.
The sensational Simpson trial was just 3 years after 4 white LAPD cops were acquitted in the videotaped beating of Rodney King. The tension was noticeable.
One of the jurors wound up saying that it was payback time for that verdict.
Now with social media and true crime docs and series like Netflix's The Menendez Brothers, Marcia says cases involving social issues get even more attention and ignite feedback.
It was like an incredible soap opera.
After the series debuted in October, a wave of interest online spurred new calls for brothers Lyle and Erik Menendez, who were sentenced to life in prison in 1994, the same year as the O.J. murders, to be resentenced and set free. Do you find it interesting, though, how times have changed, especially if you look at the O.J. Simpson case, where now it's like a tidal wave of social media that can really change the course of things and the conversation about these cases? How do you think that would have affected O.J. Simpson?
I don't know. Social media is not a predictable thing, but I do think this. I think every high-profile case that brings up issues that are compelling will be impacted by the feelings of society at that time.
That includes the sex trafficking and racketeering case of Sean Diddy Combs, a case she says will be nerve-wracking for prosecutors.
High-profile case definitely does put a great deal of pressure on the prosecutor because the whole world is watching. You know, prosecutors are expected to win, and you have the expectation of not only the public, but more importantly, the victims and the family, all the survivors. There's a great deal of pressure.
But Marcia Clark has handled it all so well, and now she's zeroing in on another historic grisly case.
As I looked at it, I realized, oh my God, this is kind of their trial of the century back in 1953. And the woman in the middle of these 2 thugs, there was 3-defendant case, it didn't fit.
Marcia is dissecting a sensational 1950s crime in her new book, Trial by Ambush, Murder, Injustice, and the Truth About the Case of Barbara Graham. Marcia, can you tell us what the case against Barbara Graham was?
It's a home invasion burglary, but the genesis of it is unusual. So the woman who was living in this home was Mabel Monahan.
Mabel Monahan ended up a murder victim, strangled and bludgeoned to death after robbers entered her Burbank, California home looking for known treasures. Barbara Graham, a part of the brazen theft, ended up facing more than she bargained for.
It came together when Emmett Perkins and Jack Santo drafted Barbara to be the lure because Mabel Monahan was very security conscious. So Barbara was used to go knock on the doors, say, you know, my car broke down, if you could just let me use your phone. Mabel, unfortunately, let her in, and the men came in right behind her.
It was unclear who killed Mabel, but Barbara was found guilty by association.
It's called the felony murder rule. And when you participate in a felony in which someone dies, even if it's accidental, you're on the hook for it.
Reporters hungry for a story flocked to interview Barbara and her lawyer. Barbara was convicted and then sent to San Quentin's gas chamber, becoming one of only a handful of women to be put to death in California. And Hollywood turned the story into an Oscar-winning movie, I Want to Live, starring Susan Hayward. But not surprisingly, Marcia's new book dives deep into the legal questions, something she's found herself doing for quite a long time.
The question I pose is, had the case been handled differently, had the jury known all that I discovered, would they have put her to death? My conclusion is no, they would not.
And like the Menendez case, Marcia says knowing what we know now about the alleged abuse the brothers suffered, would they have been sent to prison for life?
If you believe that he genuinely feared for his life, their lives, then they deserve a manslaughter and not a murder conviction, in which case they're eligible for parole immediately.